Eric, good morning.
Morning, Alexander.
It's fun to find out that you're in Ohio. So maybe
Yeah.
we'll do this again someday in person. But Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you've been up to for the last little bit here?
Well, the last little bit, I've been resting from 24 years in the FBI. I started in 2002, working drugs and then gangs in Chicago, then public corruption. There's some of that in Chicago too. I transferred to Toledo, Ohio, which is roundabout home. And from there, working out of the Cleveland division, I worked organized crime, crimes against children, financial crimes, and national security and human intelligence. So 24 years in the FBI. And oh, yeah, before that, I was a Baptist pastor.
Yes, that is an interesting career path. Why don't you just give me the rundown then of career path, how we go from Baptist pastor to FBI, and then I would love to hear about what the FBI was like in 2002. Obviously, that's after the 9/11 terror attacks, which I've learned a little bit about, and some of the failures. Maybe be interested to hear your opinion there. But how do you become an FBI agent? Like, how does one even become an FBI agent, let alone a pastor? Then directly into FBI.
Well, back then, it was a nascent internet, so it was paperwork.
Mm.
And in uh, 2002, that was filling out this long form. Now, today, you just go to FBIjobs.gov, fill it out online, it goes from there. But I had started out, went to church when I was a kid every day, normal thing, and no pressure, but it was just what we did. So grew in my faith through college, and then when I graduated, I thought, oh, I should get into Christian ministry. It just seemed natural.
Mm.
I had a good Bible knowledge, and then went through the usual path. I did some studying, but youth pastor, associate pastor, and then in the late '90s, the church where I was working in Western New York said, well, we'd like to plant a new church off of ours in the next town over. I said, great, I'd love to be a part of that. And so took a small group of Christians and we built a church. And I told them right away, what we want to do is reach people who don't go to church. We don't want to just shuffle folks from
Hmm.
one pew to the
Hmm.
next. And we built it to be something where the church was non judgmental. I told them, if we're going to make an error, let's err on the side of grace, where if God's going to judge us, he'll say, you guys were too kind to people, and I'm willing to take that shot. So, with that group, I gave them what I called a flinch test, and I said, are you able to welcome people without a flinch if they come to church and they're not wearing church clothes and a concert t shirt or something? If you have somebody walking in, you can smell alcohol in their breath. If there's piercings, tattoos, gay couples, interracial couples, are these all things that you can welcome and not have that look of, I'm also judging you? And they did great, and people came, and we were doing well. And I was doing church the way I wanted to do it. So that was fantastic. But what I found was when you reach out to people who haven't been to church their lives, they'll bring problems with them too. And I was unable to separate their issues from bearing that burden.
Mm.
So for 2 years straight, every single day without fail, I had a stress related headache.
Mm.
And it just got to a point where I had to do something different. Even though this is what I'd loved, this was successful. I had to find a new path. So I told my wife I need to find a job with less stress. And so I joined the FBI.
That is interesting. They say as a company gets bigger, the CEO's job is just to become the therapist. It kind of
Mhm.
sounds like you were that. You were like the congregation's therapist, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it was a normal thing. There was nothing I was doing that was beyond what many, many pastors do. I just was unsuccessful at not perseverating on this and, having it weigh me down. And the cue to me that I had made the right decision was the day that I got accepted in the FBI, headache stopped.
Mm. So, were you thinking about like a career in law enforcement, or were you like, I want to help people? Church. This sounds crazy. The way that I'm helping people at the church isn't working. I want to go and do FBI. Like, was it like that, or talk me through?
Maybe that was in my mind. It wasn't in the forefront. And I get asked this a lot, and my answer is the FBI seemed really cool.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
why wouldn't you want to? So I applied for two jobs. One I was overqualified for, one I was underqualified for. And the first one turned me down, but the FBI said, "Yeah, sure." And and you mentioned with 9/11, my I had applied in 2001. My application was in process. 9/11 hits, and my background was in ministering to Muslims. So you know, I had experience working with Muslims. I had knowledge of Islam, and I'm guessing that might have been part of why they said, "Yeah, let's see about you."
Mhm.
And then immediately when I got on, they put me on a drug squad. So it wasn't until I, 16 years later that I got back to working in that field.
Interesting. So you apply for the FBI, and I think also like a lot of the agencies really ramped up hiring post 9/11 too.
Yeah.
You get in, and where are you going first? Like, did they require a past career in law enforcement? Clearly, they didn't. What was the training process like?
Well, so the FBI looks to have agents from a diverse background,
Correct. I've heard that.
trying to get as many people of color as they can because, white guy's going to come all day, trying to get as many women as possible so that there's different aspects to your life that you can bring to an investigation. We do long-term investigations, we being the people I used to be with. We do long-term investigations, and so there's plenty of time for input from other people. So I'd estimate maybe 20% are former military or law enforcement,
Okay.
maybe a little less. And you can get those guys all day. That young cop, now wants to work federally. That's easy. Those guys are there. But we're seeking to have people who aren't just the attorneys, the accountants, the former military. They're looking to have people who have a insight that someone who didn't work in law enforcement might have,
Mm.
because those guys are great. We turn to them all day, but then there's different aspects. You go, maybe I can have a an eye to this, or somebody who's more curious.
Very interesting. So how do they throw you in and get you like onboarded as an FBI? But what's the role you're starting in at? Like,
Well, 4 months in Quantico, Virginia, at the academy, and that's just trying to absorb everything about this storied institution that's 100 years old, trying to understand aspects of it. So that's a fire hose where I spent 24 years, and I'm going to guess that I understand 75% of the FBI
mhm.
after all that time, because you get in your zone, you get in your area, in your field, and that's what you focus on. You become more of an expert in that. And if you get to headquarters, there's so much more to learn. I never did that. No appetite for that. But starting out in drugs, like, okay, looks like I'm getting to understand the drug world, the different cartels, street language with the gangs, trying to understand that, getting that knowledge early on of what does it take to have judicial process to get a phone tap. And so for the first 5 years I was on a drug squad, I don't, I'm going to estimate we had, one case had 26 phone taps.
Mm.
So, I'm on 40 different phones, 50 different phones during that time. So just getting all that experience flooding in and then picking it up and then getting comfortable and moving on to the next.
What kind of drugs are you looking for? I assume they're not looking for, a guy who's selling a little bit of marijuana here and there. Like
N-
how would you guys be targeting like and deciding where our efforts should lie?
Well, first off, you would have to have a literal ton of marijuana back in the early 2000s. And even then, they wouldn't get prosecuted federally. So we were doing the usual process, and we're working with local police as well. So Chicago PD would say, "Hey, we got this guy. He made a buy. He says he can move up the chain. We're just looking to police the streets. This might go somewhere." So this guy's busted. He then does a buy off of his supplier.
Mhm.
We get up on that guy, maybe do a rip. We get up on his phone. A rip being where we take the drugs
Mhm.
in the process, and they think it's just been stolen. So a number of
Oh,
techniques to just keep
interesting.
moving. Yeah, we had one where we stole, I think it was a kilogram of heroin off a guy, and stole being we're surveilling the buy. Police are there with us nearby. We have them go knock the car down. They take the drugs, and that's it. And so in Chicago,
So are you letting those people go? Like,
let them go. They're identified. we'll catch them
Okay,
later.
so did those individuals know that it was the FBI who stole it, or is it
No,
like this is? But that sounds sort of dangerous, right?
it sounds like to them it's dirty cops.
Well,
It's cops who are like, "Oh, we had a traffic stop. Oh, you have drugs? We're taking that." And now we can keep the investigation going. And these guys are like, "Can I have a receipt? Because I have to show loss of drugs to my boss, or else I'm on the hook for it." So,
right, that movie that just came out called The Rip with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. I'm sure you saw that, but that I guess I maybe that was just lost on me that they were attempting to make it look like someone else stole the money or the drugs. Was that really like kind of common? And then also, to me, seems like that would create criminals very distrusting of law enforcement agencies, and maybe like a little bit hard to tell like who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, right?
fine
Yeah.
if that causes discomfort to them. Yeah, I don't remember if it was that case or another one where we'd done a rip where we had to intervene and actually move in and arrest the drug runner, because then we were catching on the phone that they were going to kill him. They didn't believe, that it was taken. The the guys higher up the chain believed that he was stealing from 'em, so we had to arrest him and get him out of there
Yeah.
and take the case down a little quicker.
Well, I guess the distrust, I get it. And you say, well, I don't care about the distrust of
Yeah.
the criminal, but I guess I could foresee how that could spiral negatively if their sense and sentiment of law enforcement becomes worse and worse and worse. And then they get into a situation where, oh, they catch a cop or whatever. And it's like, let's kill this guy. They're stealing from us all the time and they're, locking us up.
Yeah, for the most part, and we would work with this with informants. For the most part, if a criminal thinks you're a cop, if the criminal thinks you're an informant, they're typically going to just go the other way. They're not. They know that the charges are going to be much harder if they threaten a police officer, harm them, or threaten someone working for the police. So, when we'd send an informant in, they're like, "Yeah, but what if they find out that I'm an informant?" I'm like, they're going to drop everything and walk away.
Hmm.
They're If they have a belief that you're an informant, all they're going to do is try to out you somehow, and that's it.
Right.
Like they don't want that extra charge on them.
Well, right, because if this person is an informant, then ostensibly the police and the FBI know where they are and they know what they're doing. And they know who they're with and around. So if they find,
And
they wind up missing, it's like, okay, well,
yeah, and we've got an investment in them too. So, you stick your thumb in our eye, then you're going to get something back.
mm.
Not violence, just charges.
So as you're kind of moving up this chain, like eventually it has to become international at some point in time, mostly or no?
Y- yes, and so this is what was great in Chicago. So no lack of drugs being sold there, and we were mainly looking at powder cocaine and heroin at the time.
Hmm.
But we had to, in order to open an investigation, we had to link it to a known cartel, and
Okay.
and that was and that's just administrative. So we'd find something on a phone call and go, "Oh, okay, here we go. It's connected to this case," and just pencil whip it to say, "Here it is." But there are guys we'd arrest, and dealing in multi kilos of cocaine each month, and we say, "Oh, okay, so you're part of the Sinaloa cartel," and the guy's like, "I don't know. I buy from Charlie in El Paso. I don't know where he gets it from."
Mm,
So they're they just know that they have suppliers. They've got guys that they distribute to, and very few would know who they're connected to. But we would often then, as we bust this guy, and then we're on his phone, and we see he's talking to somebody in El Paso, then we pass that on to that division. Now they're working it up, and they're going across the border.
interesting. So let's say that you find out it's Charlie in El Paso. Um, then you pass it to the El Paso, which I've been to El Paso, fun town. Um, what are they going to do? Like, how would they handle that if they find out? Okay, Charlie, drives across the border. Like, what can they do actually?
Well, they're going to be getting up on phones too, and then they're going to be working with either the Mexican police or DEA to work cross border. They're going to identify routes and just keep picking things off, mainly to work on our side of the street, and then depending on the connections they have in Mexico, if they've got somebody they trust, passing that along. Otherwise, for the most part, we're working domestically and just, those guys, if they can pick off more and more weight, then they're going to do that as much as they can.
Mm. What was it like working with the Mexican police? From my very limited knowledge, and I'm guessing maybe this was worse in the early 2000s, maybe not. What I had come to understand from popular culture is they're probably on the cartel's payroll. They probably don't want to get involved, honestly. They don't want their family kidnapped. Um, is that true, or are there shades of gray there?
Uh, True. Uh, I don't know how it is now, and we didn't deal with the Mexican police much at all. But at that time in the early 2000s, I remember I had a colleague who worked in a sister uh, drug squad who was from Colombia. And I remember discussing with her, like, Mexico is as bad as Colombia had used to be
Yeah.
in the past. And at that time, kidnappings, executions all the time, and it didn't creep up to Chicago where we would get, a cartel hitman coming up. Typically, they're buffered enough where they're going to send somebody, they're going to get their money, but there had to be a level of trust within even the cartel and their suppliers and distributors along the way
Hmm.
because you're making money. So if something happens to my drugs and now I owe you to just cut me off or kill me, well, you're just going to influence me to give you money back somehow, and it's all on consignment along the way. So, if this is a guy who does a lot of weight, then cutting him out of the picture, now you got to find somebody else who's going to sell. It's in their best interest to keep a good business practice going.
Interesting. So you work on drugs for a long time. Does it at any point ever feel kind of futile? Is it like whack-a-mole? Like, we're not going to stop this. Like, even again, you go all the way back to the border in Mexico or Colombia or wherever the cocaine's being produced, which I think most of it is in Latin America, from what I understand.
Yeah.
Just the literally the coca plant is there. Coca plant doesn't grow in Ohio. Um, does it feel like whack-a-mole? Do you ever feel, like, kind of frustrated that, like, we're not making any inroads with this thing?
I wasn't frustrated. Number one, it was early in my career, so I was just excited, running around late nights, secret surveillance, all this stuff. But there was questions brought up, people asking, like, don't you feel like, just as you're asking, and yeah, we just had to do our job. So if the criminals could sell drugs with impunity and it's just wide open, then obviously it's going to bring more harm to society. So our arrests and investigations had an effect beyond we just arrested 6 people. It's that all the many dozens and thousands of others have to tailor their work so that they're not wide open.
Yeah.
So it did slow down their process. It made them have to be more careful, which meant less drug sales. So it did have a dampening effect, and at least that's what I told myself
Mhm.
that there had to be some type of
Balance it.
justice brought. Yeah, there had to be some type of prison sentence that kept them hiding somewhat.
Mhm. Now, don't know if you ever plan to run for president, but let's say you're president all of a sudden, knowing what you know now about this kind of business and this, if you wanna call it a game. Is there something that you could or would do to say, "We're gonna fundamentally change this," and I'm very libertarian. I'm not sure if I'm, like, in favor of all drugs are legal, but I also think it's a little odd that, like, the government's allowed to tell me what I'm allowed to put in my own body when I'm a 34-year-old pretty educated man. So, what do you like, ho is there something you could do that could make this situation better, safer, taxation, which I'm not into either, but, if they're gonna tax it, you're right. So maybe talk me through that.
Well, so you're libertarian, but you'll also understand the common sense of, well, we have seatbelt laws. Well, we have seatbelt laws. Why do you tell me to put a seatbelt on? Well, it's because of how that affects our medical system, and it's for your own safety. So there's a certain amount where there has to be paternalism involved too. And so it's difficult because anything that I would think is not beyond what's been proposed by other people. The issue is you've got a sinking boat, so somebody's got to try to fix the hole, or you're going to sink. But also, you have to bail too, or you're going to sink. And so you're asking about fixing the hole while law enforcement is bailing.
Mhm.
And the hole is it's not about the drugs coming in, it's about the appetite for the
Yes.
drugs. And so that's the hole in the ship while law enforcement is bailing out by making arrests and trying to keep the drug dealers at bay. And I don't know how you do that, because that's not just education. People don't turn to drugs because they don't understand them or have a sense of what could happen if they do these drugs. They do them because there's trauma in their lives, or they're bored, they're seeking something different. So I, oh my god, like that's a whole, I don't know how you fix.
Yeah.
And so then we get to, well, if we can't fix that trauma or the sole reason why people are getting into drug addiction, well, we'll just have to penalize it then, because that's, it's the idea of, I can raise you as a child to a point where you say, I do these things because they are profitable to society. That's a high level of um, right and wrong. But until then, you're just a kid. And I tell you, if you do that again, I'm going to send you to your room. You're not going to have supper. And that's a punishment. So there's your answer. There's a problem in our society where people turn to drugs because they don't like the life that they're experiencing and they need to numb it.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything we can do to ever get humans to not have some amount of appetite for stimulants or,
Yeah.
you know, um, speed or opiates, caffeine. I mean, I went to Qatar and Dubai for the World Cup. This was the last World Cup. And they say there's very little alcohol, which was true. There was alcohol, like you could find it. It was like hotel bars and stuff. But you know what was on every single corner? Hookah. Every single place they're doing hookah. And it's like, okay, well, like far be it, I think hookah's probably better for you overall than alcohol. But like we're kind of just saying, well, what is allowed? Oh, we can do hookah? All right. And so I think humans like doing drugs and stimulants. I don't know if we're ever going to totally solve that, but I am with you. I think there's a big difference between I'm excited to like do heroin in my trap house versus like you and me like going to get a wine or a beer on a patio.
Right. One's social and the other is trying to dismiss and forget and not be a part of what you're living in right now. Who's going to heroin because they think this will better my life. It's so the education part, like, this isn't well thought through.
Yeah.
This is a response. This is a reaction.
Yeah. Yeah, but there are also wealthy people. I mean, look at like Tiger Woods, like just rolled his car again. Apparently he's got really, really bad back pain. He's not doing
Right.
street heroin, but like, is it really that much better that he's doing pharmaceutical like grade heroin that he's given by a wealthy doctor? I don't know, but who am I to say like he has to be suffering and in back pain all the time. Now you can't go
Right.
drive and roll your car. That's a different story.
Yeah, and you can't educate Tiger Woods on that. He's got it from experience. He knows that that's a problem. And yet he has trauma. I mean, the trauma is pain.
Mhm.
I got to assume he's got life trauma too that's gone on. Like that, why does he go to so many women if he doesn't have some type of absence, some type of hole in his life? He's got a beautiful model wife, but he's still going to, here's a 10 at home, but he's, finding sixes and sevens because he's filling a void.
Tough.
And
Yeah.
that's nothing we ever discussed while we were
Yeah.
running the streets of Chicago looking for
Right.
dopers.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know what because I have very little trust for the pharmaceutical companies too. I mean, we saw that the opiate epidemic, like they were, just as bad, if not worse. They had the legal lens, right? And they basically put the person at the FDA in that approved a lot of these opiates. And then they came out and got this giant, paycheck contract after. I don't know if you saw that like documentary about it. But I don't know if I trust them more than I trust the cartel. It's just like this thing where I don't know what the solution would be.
Yeah, for me, it's always been when you have such a broad and grand issue, you there's different people involved to try to attack the edges of that, but otherwise, you can only work on here. Say, well, let me make sure that I'm as clean as I need to be, and I'm self-assessing, and then creep out to family, and then maybe you can affect some in your community too. If everybody's doing that, then those bubbles are going to overlap. But until then, yeah, people are breaking down, and their bubble's not there because they're falling apart, and so is their family.
Yeah. And I think also, people talk about things that work in other countries. I think our society is quite a bit different. We're like a high speed, high intensity culture. And you see, we just like, we do extremes, like we don't have like, oh, social drinking, like they have wine at lunch, in Italy. It's like, if you're drinking at lunch, it's like, oh, we're going to have 6 drinks. It's like, we don't do anything like, uh, just a little bit in the United States. So, but where do you go after this drug thing? Sounds like you did that for quite a while.
Did that for a while, and then we had 2 drug squads in Chicago. They dissolved ours, presumably because we had solved the drug problem and it was all maintenance, so they only needed 1. But they dissolved my squad, and then I went on to work gangs in Chicago, which was the same type of thing, but now we're working with more violent people.
Mm,
And here's 14, 15-year-old kids on corners as lookouts while we're going after the mid-20 guys who our guys that I previously had looked at in their 30s, 40s, 50s were selling to along the way.
yeah.
And then, now we're getting more into the crack cocaine at that time. Um, Worked that for a good bit until a friend of mine was transferring from Chicago and said, "Oh, I'm on a public corruption and civil rights squad. You think that's something you'd like to work? I'll put your name in." And at this point, it had been 6 years of late nights and long days and weekends, and I thought I might want to work something closer to banker's hours, so jumped into that for about a year and a half in
What
Chicago.
about the danger associated with kind of going after these gangs? And I assume it's all pretty similar. It's like kind of a despair, and these guys and gals aren't getting into gangs because they got into Harvard and they just didn't choose to do that. It sounds like it's probably mostly from low income poverty and examples around them.
Yeah, and I was going to touch on the examples around them. So yes, there's despair, there's a need or desire to survive, and so this is how you make money. But also, you're a child and you're growing up in this, and all your idols are involved in this. So it's an expectation
Hmm.
that it's like growing up in a divorced family or an alcoholic family. This is what you see,
Right.
so there's going to be a tendency. Not all the kids are going to this going to happen to, but there's more of a likelihood because this is what you've experienced. So you don't grow up and say, I think I'd like to be in a gang, because you don't have things lacking. You have friends, you have purpose, you have opportunity. That's not present in a lot of these kids. And then also, you didn't grow up where, well, my dad was a plumber, I'm going to be a plumber too. My dad was a gangster, I'm going to be a gangster too.
Mm. So as you're tracking these gangs, like, is danger a part of that? I assume. Are you out there on the street? Like, how does that work? Are you in an office? Are you in the streets? Is there a mixture of that?
Yeah, there's always a mixture. We're on the streets more than most agents, but not as much as the
Yeah.
cops. And yeah, the danger's there. The difference with working gangs as opposed to the larger weight narcotics distributors is that we had to be sneakier,
Hmm.
because you can't be seen by the drug dealers, but they didn't have lookouts, making $10 to just stand on a corner and make a phone call. So much like, coming upon a bunch of animals or something, you find deer in the woods. If they see you, then they scatter, and now they know our vehicles, and now we have a more difficult time. But it was similar in the same way. We're making buys, and then we're working up on phones. The difference being, we would be arresting. I mean, I was on arrest where we had over 50 people
Mm,
that we were arresting at once, as opposed to maybe 3 or 4
mm.
with the heavier weight narcotics.
Now, why would FBI be going after these gangs versus local police?
Well, the difference is this: local police, they clean up the corner.
Okay.
They make an arrest and they take care of what's in front of them, whereas the FBI is pledged to do long-term enterprise investigations. So we're looking to try to disable, take down the leaders of a gang, whereas the leader of the gang isn't making a dope buy, so they're not going to get caught by the cops. But we can get up on their phone. We can bring more complex charges against them. Um, Maybe a conspiracy charge because they've been working with others.
Hmm.
Um, there's we have more options because we can take the time to look into their lives and find out what they're doing. Chicago police doesn't have the time to spend 2 years getting on people's phones and seeing who they can get up to.
I see.
But then they'll work with us so that, I mean, this is their city, so they want it clean. So like they're bringing us, hey, here's an informant, here's a buy, here's a guy we're looking at. Let's see what we can do together.
Mm. Chicago seems like you could probably comment on this. Kind of a rough city. Was it uniquely rough?
Yeah, yeah, it was very violent at this time. I don't know how it is now. I'm not sure it's gotten any better,
Mm.
but the gangs were just rife in Chicago, and there were sections that were dangerous. We lived inside the city limits at this time in a okay neighborhood, but I wouldn't even let my young kids play in the backyard that had a 6 foot spike
Mm.
fence without somebody being out there too. So the issue is this neighborhood is bad, but guys wander into your neighborhood
Yeah.
too, or who knows what
Yeah.
happens.
You want to
I
go
had
from the bad neighborhood to the nice neighborhood to steal the catalytic converter. Duh.
or anything. I had a guy I remember coming downstairs from our condo one morning, and there was police tape on the front door because a guy had been shot and died in our front lawn.
Mm.
Like, fantastic.
Um, so what's the violence like component? Where does that come from? Who are these, gangs being violent to? Is it rival gangs mostly?
Yeah, it's rival gangs. They have territories. They're trying to have more sales. There's a lot that goes on with respect where, you have to show that you're strong or someone has disrespected someone. In the case where the guy died on my front lawn, it was the common denominator of a dispute over a woman.
Mm,
So that'll happen too. It's just that, rather than you and me arguing or maybe having a fight, I shoot you.
mm,
And that's how they settle things.
mm. Interesting. So what were the gangs mostly doing? Like what separates a gang from me and my friends like hanging out and maybe we sell a little bit of pot on the side?
Well, if you and your friends sell a little pot on the side and hang out, that's fine. It's But if you claim to have, hey, this is where we sell our pot, you just stole one of my customers and now I'm going to take a lead pipe to you. That's the
I
gang.
see.
They're the ones who say, like, you're just selling pot, make a little going to the movies money, helping out some friends, but these guys are trying to build an
I
enterprise.
see.
And there's something natural that they want to have a strong group, an organized group, and one that can benefit those people. So the more they can sell, the more money they make. They can distribute that. They get the cars, they get the jewelry, and they can think of themselves as this strong entity as well.
So the element of violence essentially is kind of what turns you into a gang, if you will.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, guys selling, even if guys like, well, I used to sell pot. Now I found a dude who sells MDMA, and I can do that now too. Like, just because buddies get together, it's about the territory and the violence that goes with it.
I see.
And frankly, in Chicago and in Toledo, I don't think folks would care that much about the drug sales if it wasn't accompanied by the
I see.
violence. And typically, we went after the most violent offenders and might use drug sales just to catch
I
them.
see.
But they were targeted because these guys have, a few homicides on their sheet, so we want to get them off the street.
Mm. Now, are the gangs mostly just or is it mostly just drug sales or are there like some clever, alternative means of making money? that you went, oh, okay, that's actually kind of interesting. I hadn't thought about that one.
It's mostly drug sales, but occasionally we'd get human trafficking
Mm,
where they're also working prostitution. So that was a big thing in Toledo, although it wasn't. Sometimes it was loosely connected to
I see.
gangs, and sometimes we would have gangs who would run girls. More often, it was just the singular pimp who had his place, he had his stable, and that's how he earned his money. Maybe he sold some drugs too, but for the most part, I mean, it's enough to try to work a stable of girls and women. So yeah, occasionally they'd have that. There'd be theft as well too.
Mm. But not really a whole lot of sophisticated, um, like, oh, we're doing fraud, or oh, we're doing. So we had a group that stole checks out of our mailbox, and from what I gleaned from it, they pay someone, probably someone on drugs, to drive around mailboxes and just steal mail. They stole the mail, they took it, they scanned our check, and then this is the part that's a little confusing. I don't know how, but they created a check that was like our check, and then they took the signature and they were able to get like a computer rendering of it. And then they again probably paid someone, on drugs, to go into the bank. And this was what I was confused by. I was like, well, I don't understand how they like got cash. Like, you have to give them your ID. And did they have a fake ID? They're like, no, they just gave them their real ID. And it was like, Alex Johnson is taking out $2,500 in cash on this check that was made out to him. And they did end up getting like 10 grand from us. Now the bank ended up
Mm.
paying us back, but from what we were told is there was not a whole lot they could do, because they're smart enough that they know that if they stay under $10,000 in individual thefts, it's just a misdemeanor. These people on drugs don't really care about a misdemeanor. He said if we could get them on like conspiracy, that would be different, like an organized crime thing. But he's like, I don't know how we even do that, really.
Yeah, so this is early 2000s. Computers weren't that great yet, and so yep, I've seen how sometimes, and it may not be the gang per se, that may be an offshoot, or that gang is five guys, and you'll get families like that who they get that talent, they learn it from the streets, they learn it from prison, and they bring that back, and they say, hey, we can do this, we don't need to have a territory, and this is how we're going to make our money. And I'll tell you, Alex, have me on a separate time, and we'll do a podcast, which is this is how you can break the law and never get charged.
Mm,
And you just gave like an example, like you keep things, if you make it complicated and yet don't hit a threshold, that's number one.
mm,
If I go ahead and cross state lines so that you're in Columbus, but you drive into Kentucky and your crime takes place in Kentucky, then the local police there are like, this guy's not here, he's hard to track, and there's got to be coordination. If folks can do something like that, and then the FBI goes, dude, we're not going after, six guys who are stealing checks. And it fits into that perfect category of it's nobody's authority.
mm,
And and just like you say, get drug addicts who don't care. Like they eat another charge, it doesn't matter. They got their drugs. You put all those things in there and it's the perfect crime.
mm. Well, nowadays, I just feel like you could do like so much like internet fraud, like I don't know if you've ever watched this show. It's called Trafficked by Mariana Van Zeller.
Mm.
You'd probably love it because it'd be like right up your alley. But she's crazy. She's like legitimately like crazy. She's like this pretty Portuguese woman, but speaks great English, and she'll like embed herself with these different people who are doing these different crimes. And so she'll go literally to Colombia and be like, "I'm going to backpack across Colombia with the cocaine traffickers." She's insane. But she did a big one about scams, and it was just like I think it was like it's big in Jamaica, like these like phone scammers and email scammers, and they're just like hanging out. They're like taking money from grandma, but they're like, look, these are wealthy Americans. We don't care. I'm like, oh, geez, I think that would be something I would probably do if I was getting into crime. Don't go stick up a liquor store. That's crazy.
Now you're gonna get shot.
Yeah.
No, and we in the FBI would get that all the time of people calling in, and they could say, "I've lost 10,000. My grandmother lost 100,000," and yet it's in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, it's out of the
And
country.
so it's got to get aggregated to say, well, here's this criminal enterprise, and it's not just the 10,000. They've done that 10,000 times. So now here's an aggregate amount. Now we could charge it, but now we got to go to Romania
Right.
and work with those officials and see what appetite they have or abilities. And, and by then those guys broke up and they're gone, and who knows who you
Or they
charge.
moved to another country in Europe and
Right.
they just,
Yep.
yeah, that's tough. That's really tough. So what was this kind of like white collar crime? Did you call it political corruption? Is that what you said?
Uh, Public
Public
corruption
corruption.
that we worked for in Chicago and also in civil rights, so it crossed over doing some of
What
both.
does that mean, civil rights? I understand like civil rights movement. What does it mean for you?
When the police violate your
I see.
rights. So one of the cases we had was on a Chicago police commander named John Burge. He and his group of detectives regularly in the 70s and 80s would torture confessions out of
Mm,
subjects. And they were, I don't, I would say almost, just because I don't know the entire case and history, but I would say almost exclusively black men.
mm,
And so the PD didn't care about the rumors, didn't care about the allegations because they were getting the job
yeah.
done. The majority of these victims were guilty. They were just tortured to get their confessions. So they would beat them, they would suffocate
Mm,
them. There was always this long held rumor that Burge, who had served in the Vietnam War, had a crank telephone which would create electricity, and they would put alligator clips on the genitals of the subjects and shock them until they gave a confession.
mm,
So all these things going on, we had I remember one victim we talked to, and these victims were all former rapists, murderers, arsonists, and so they're victims,
mhm,
but also they're criminals.
mhm,
And he told about how he was handcuffed, taken under a bridge, and then one of the detectives with his hands cupped behind his back stood on the bumper and lifted up his arms until he said he thought his shoulders would tear out of their
mm,
sockets. And so he confessed, and he told me, well, because of that, I missed my mother's funeral because I was in prison while she died. And I was curious, honestly, if did they make you confess to something you didn't do? And he said, no, but I never would have confessed. And so I'm like, well, you're not going to get sympathy for that
mhm,
for me. Like, give me the facts. You deserve pain for what you did, but the police can't do that.
mhm,
The police aren't allowed to torture people. And so that was our focus of just saying, we're going to get police officers from doing this. The difficulty with that was that was a case that was 25 years old.
mm,
So Chicago PD didn't care back in the day. FBI didn't do anything about it. But then Burge was sued federally, civilly. And during that suit, he said, by one of the victims, he said, I know nothing and never witnessed any torture under my command. And so my buddy Jake had a case going to charge him, like Elliot Ness, uh, charge him with perjury and obstruction of justice for stating in court that he didn't know anything. So we proved that he did engage in it, so he would have known about it. And so years later,
mhm.
it was some form of justice to get him, I think it was like 4.5 years in prison.
Mm. Yeah, and I'm sure you know that people who are getting tortured will admit to certain things, and who
Yeah.
knows what was admitted to and what was charged and what was real and what wasn't.
Yeah. He and his detectives had carried this on for so long. Certainly they made mistakes. Certainly they had a guy, here's a black guy. He's done something. Let's get him for this. And then the true criminal gets away. This guy gets charged with something he didn't do under the notion that, well, we know he's done other
Yeah,
stuff,
right,
so
right, right.
we'll get him for this one instead of that one.
So is that the public corruption kind of side of things, like, or are you going after politicians who are making corrupt deals and accepting gold bars, for this, that, and the third?
Well, that was the civil rights portion of it. The public corruption was we were on Rod Blagojevich, the sitting governor of Illinois' phone to listen to
Interesting.
him.
Okay. So because this I didn't know anything about this story until, I don't know, 3 months ago. He went on the Joe Rogan Experience, and I listened to it, and I'm like, I don't really know what's true and what's not. I don't know if you listened to that or you could tell me this story in the background. You'd probably know it way better than anyone else.
Well, now I've got to ask, like, what was he saying?
That he was innocent. There was a political hit
Okay.
piece. But I don't know, you know. Of course, his story sounded good. Um, but I would
Well,
have to go back and re-listen with the new
yeah,
information
yeah.
you're about to tell me. But you could certainly listen, and I'm sure you'd probably be
No, I'm not
cursing.
going to because it'll make me
Yeah, right.
angry. So his argument would be and was that he was just what they call horse trading.
Do you wanna go
S-
back and give us, like, the landscape of this
Yeah.
whole story?
Oh, oh yeah, absolutely. So Barack Obama gets elected. He, as a senator from Illinois, gets elected as president. So that falls then to the governor to appoint a new
Which
senator.
is a big deal, a senator coming in. Huge, huge
Yeah,
thing. If you're a senator, I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely. You got
that's huge.
there's 100 of
Yeah.
them. So what Blagojevich did, and we were tipped off by one of his aides, was he was trying to sell Obama's seat.
And he was the governor at
So
the time.
he was, yeah, Blagojevich was a governor. Obama was not yet president, but he was going to be. And so Blagojevich was making calls to say, "What will you give me for this?" And I remember, is swearing okay?
Sure, yeah.
So we're listening to his phones, and Blagojevich, I forget who he's talking to, but he says, "I've got this thing, and it's fucking golden, and I don't want to give it away for nothing."
Mhm.
And and I remember listening to that. That's not the exact quote, and I thought, "Oh, that's going to play in court.
Mm.
Like they're going to use that clip right there in court," which they did. So one thing I learned about at least Rod Blagojevich, and I'd hate to think it about most governors, is that he did absolutely nothing. He Two things: he never called anyone but his secretary Mary. He would call her and he would say, "Get this guy on the phone." And so he was so arrogant that everyone came to him.
Mm.
So even if I wanted to talk to you, I'd tell my wife, like, "Hey, get Alex on the phone." And now you're calling me, you're answering to me, you're coming to me. So it was so kingly. And then nothing else that he did had any substance. He called the manager, Dusty Baker of the
Yep.
Cubs, and he's like, "Hey, who are you playing in right field? And why you have him there? You got to bat him fifth." And he's trying to give him lineup advice.
Weird,
It was ridiculous.
weird.
So he'd spend all day in the gym, and he'd have his phone across the room, and you'd hear clanking, and he's just yelling across the room to people. Did nothing, but then also time after time, he's trying to find out what he can get. So his argument is that's what politicians do.
Mhm.
I was looking for political favors, and that's normal. Hey, if we appoint this guy, then will you vote for me in the future? Will you recruit people?
Don't donate to my
Whatever my
campaign. That it feels like the donate to the campaign thing is super dirty, right?
Oh, absolutely. And his argument would be it had nothing to do with money. It's just political
Mhm.
influence. So you tell me who's good, and if I put him in there, then you're my guy now. Like you're on my side no matter what I bring, and that's just horse trading, is what he called it. Which eventually a jury said no, it's beyond that, and then of course then Trump pardoned him.
Mm. So you guys were clearly tracking him prior to this for some reason.
Well, we were tracking him because one of his aides came to us and said, "Hey,
Oh,
look,
this is happening.
this is happening." So, and I very vividly recall the day that we were called into my supervisor's office. He shuts the door and he says, "I'm going to tell you something because we need bodies to man a wire shift. You can't tell anyone in your family this. You can't tell other agents
Mm.
this, but we're listening to the
Clearly,
governor."
that was like a pretty, serious statement. You'd probably never heard something like that.
Never. And so there's, maybe 30 people who know about this, maybe more. And the only other people who knew about it towards the governor's side were his state police protective detail. So the boss of the Chicago division had to go to the boss of the Illinois State Police and say, "Hey, we're going to put bugs in Rod Blagojevich's office, and we need to have you let us in."
And
And so,
that clearly is like a physical thing. You are physically going into his office and doing bugs.
yeah, and they were terrible. So,
Um,
so we just listened to the
so
phones.
let me ask a really dumb question. What would have been legal for him if he would say like, "Hey, Eric, like your brother, he is actually like a high level, Democratic politician. I tell you what, if I make him a senator, like, would you, your cousin's, the head of Raytheon, would he donate to my campaign? Like, could something like that, like, be?"
I think even that we could get you on. You might not end up getting convicted, but that walks the line too. If he had stuck with just, look, bring me candidates, here's 6 guys, here's people that I think would do a good job, and then from there, you go to, like, how loyal these guys gonna be if I appoint this guy? Is there gonna be does a union have somebody that they want in favor, and now they're gonna be on my side? If it's just done in the sense of, I mean, that's disgusting, that's still immoral, but it's not necessarily illegal if he just kept it with, vote with me if I do you this solid.
Mhm. Well, I guess maybe I'm dumb, but I just assume that's how all of that pretty much works.
Well, right. And he was saying that's what I was doing. I wasn't trying to actually sell it for money.
Mm,
And we ended up having to take it down a little premature because then the Chicago Sun-Times ran, or maybe it was a Tribune, ran an article about that aide um, being the snitch. Like, did he do recordings?
mm.
And so at that time, we got to take it down.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of like assume that politics is so dirty, um, that they're all just like, "You're our guy. We're going to support you. We're all going to obviously vote." I mean, you look at the Democrats and Republicans; they all pretty much vote together. There's like two people who don't vote with them, so it's like this wink, wink, nod, nod. You're on the team. Like,
Yeah,
we'll keep pushing you as long as you keep voting with the team. So I guess not to sound
right.
not to sound naive here, but I just kind of always thought that that's how that worked.
And if you're the majority leader or the whip, then you are saying, vote with me. Like, if you're on the edge, hey, Alex, I got $50,000. I got $100,000 I can give to your campaign that we've got
Exactly.
in our
The
fund.
Democratic
And now,
National Campaign has this big fund. This was something that I learned, and you probably know all this stuff, but when Biden was running the first time, there was a big push towards Bernie. He was really popular, and the Democratic National Campaign said, actually, we've got this $250 million pool of like generic Democratic donations. We're giving that all to Biden. So I guess, I'm like, well, that seems way worse than like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just naive here though.
oh, I think again, there's immoral and then there's illegal.
I got it.
And there's so many immoral things that I witnessed. Guys who actually broke the law. Like, if I told you, hey, this guy did this, you're like, well, that's got to be against the law. I'm like, yeah, it is. But he's not going to get charged because it's too tenuous that we'd get a conviction, and the prosecutors don't want to tie up their time with cases going to trial.
Hmm.
They can't.
Hmm.
And so if you're on the edge of, like, well, not only can we prove it, but, like, are you going to fight us on it? That's going to tie us up too much.
Mm. Okay. Well, while we're on this topic, you were in the FBI for so long. There's this big talk, oh, that we're weaponizing the Justice Department, right? And it from the outside, it does seem like some of that is actually happening. Like, I'm not a Trump guy, but it seemed like all these cases against him with like the value of his real estate seemed like that was kind of politically motivated. I don't think it's a good thing to like reverse course and do it the other direction. And I certainly don't know the facts on all those cases. I'm not going to act like he's totally innocent. Trump's 100% broke the law many times, like absolutely positively, no questions asked. But like, what's your sense of that? And like, when you hear that, are you going like, yeah, that's actually like kind of right and inappropriate, or is it like the former governor of Illinois thing where it's like, I don't really understand this. He can spin a good story and say they're politically, targeting me,
Yeah. So during different administrations, different attorneys general, there'll
and that's
be
the head of
um,
like the. Yep.
DOJ.
Okay.
So there will be influences or maybe pet projects, things that are going to be highlighted that this administration says, let's go after these guys. Let's see, let's give some more weight to these types of investigations, and that'll trickle down to a degree. But by the time it trickles down to your area, like I'm just working the cases in front of
Mhm.
me. So I'll give you an example for this. Under Trump's first term, there was a push under Jeff Sessions as Attorney General to look into Antifa. Well, there's demonstrations going on. There was some violence, destruction of property. Makes sense. You know, we want to see if guys are plotting to now come and harm people or destroy businesses, and we want to prevent that. And so there's an influence to
Mhm.
say, see what's
Mhm.
there. And so we looked into it, and at least in our area, we look into it, and like, there's nothing here. And so we have that. And then under Biden, again, much of this is natural. Now we're looking more into the rise of racially motivated violent
Mhm.
extremists or white nationalists,
Mhm.
Nazis. And so we had many more cases on that. Now, you can have cases and then you can waste your time. So like with Antifa, we would have some cases, not many, and then it just wouldn't go anywhere because there's nothing to charge them with. With many of these white supremacists, we're getting somewhere. We're actually getting some charges. The difficulty is we wouldn't get many terrorism related charges. We would get guys talking about violence, and so now we can look at them, and then we'd get them like, okay, this guy's a felon, and he just showed an informant his gun that he has. So, all right, well, let's get him off the street if he's talking about violence, and we'll use that felon in possession charge to, it's a legitimate charge. It's not like you're making something up, but it's done under the guise of he's a white supremacist and is talking about harming minorities. So let's just get in front of this.
Mm. Yeah, actually, I read this book, Codename Pale Horse. I don't know if you ever interacted with this guy or knew this guy. I'm sure it's a huge organization, but you probably know about it. He wrote the book about being the undercover, like white supremacist thing.
Yeah, I just came across that book the other day,
It's
so I've
it's
got it on
really
my list.
good, and he does the audiobook too, and he's like really engaging, and he's a great speaker. So I'm sure you'd have fun with it too. Yeah, I guess stuff like that, like trickle down. Go get Antifa. It's like yeah, like or go get the whatever white nationalists. I guess what I would be more concerned at is this high level like things that are literally the people around decision making and power sources. And maybe that's like the
Well,
president says, "Go get this guy," and it's like, okay, let's start putting some charges on this person. I mean, even
yeah,
what's his name, the individual who just resigned from uh, Department of War. They're like, "Oh, he's doing illegal stuff," and it's like, well, geez.
yeah, that's garbage. And if you can tell it's garbage, it probably is. For the most part, there's two different FBIs. There's 99.5% of the FBI, which is the 38,000 support staff and agents who are just doing what's in front of
Bo-
them, trying to keep the community
Boots on the
safe.
ground kind of people.
Yeah, and that's the great majority. And then there's headquarters, and those are, you know, many well-meaning men and women too, but also those who are trying to make a career out of it, trying to move up, maybe they're ideologues according to a different administration, and so now they'll make those choices. And some of them are making those choices and decisions because they're afraid if they don't, they'll lose their job. And here they are, 18 years in, and they don't want to lose a pension, so hold my nose and go. Let's see what happens. Justice system has checks and balances, so if he's not guilty, he's not. That's the unfortunate thing, is that there's everywhere in the FBI, and then there's DC that is going to be beholding to a larger degree to an administration.
I think that's like the frustration of the Americans is right. Like your local, FBI agent, you probably never interact with them. At least I hope you don't. They're probably pretty normal, pretty cool, pretty like you and me, like having a conversation. But then once you get up to that super high level, like right at the tip top, you're like, this is a whole different thing. This is a different thing, and you're kind of the political class, as people are calling it, the Epstein class now, right? Which I'd love
Yeah.
to hear about that. And they just don't seem to have the same will of at helping the people in America as maybe other people do.
No, I mean they're caught up in DC, and their world is separate from Toledo, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. It's not, they're not looking at the old lady who lost money, as we're talking about before. That's not their concern. They don't care. Their concern is such grander scale of, how can I influence politics and government with some of these investigations, and as you see, like many of them just fall flat. So it's just a scare tactic for much of it.
Mm, yeah, interesting. What was interaction with the CIA like? Um, because
Uh,
ostensibly these are very different organizations,
yeah.
but when I hear about like weaponizing the Justice Department, I'm thinking FBI and CIA. Like, and I have very limited trust of the CIA based on everything that I've learned about the 30, 40, 50 years of just despicable, terrible things that they've done to American citizens and people. All God only knows what they've done to people in poor countries all over the world. Um, what was that like?
So the involvement with the CIA would only take place then when I was working counterterrorism, national security, and it's very limited because you get guys on rotation who've come from years overseas and now they're working domestically. And the CIA is very limited into what they can do domestically, and so they've got to do it in conjunction with the FBI. So they're typically looking to work with businesses or well-placed informants who can now provide some overseas assistance. So they're kind of like recruiters in the US, that they're looking to assist the large portion of their agency, which is overseas, by what can be gathered or gotten into here in the US. And so I've met some agency guys, and they're super cool. They're nice guys. And I don't know how much they're playing me too,
Right.
but I was also trying to play them back. There was one guy who came in and he had done some high speed stuff in the military and overseas. And yet here he was, just a guy, couldn't even carry a gun for his work, but that was part of his culture. So when we'd have range days with firearms, I'm like, "Hey, buddy, want to come in? Free ammo? You know, get your groove back." He's like, "Yeah, that'd be great." And so, we kind of played each other. And I've had colleagues who said, "I don't trust a single thing they do," and others who were like, "We got to build something here." So
Mm.
my what I try to do is build something that if we needed favors, if we needed assistance, we had somebody you can go to, because we're limited overseas.
Did it appear as if the culture was vastly different?
Oh, I had one guy who said, "Yeah, my son, I'm looking to get him into maybe the FBI when he grows up, or the CIA." And I told him, "Don't go in the CIA.
Mm,
Like, unless your son wants to be single, because it'll destroy your family."
mm,
So FBI, I've been out late nights many, many times. I've had weekends. I've lost days, but I'm back home then. And so things, and then many times, like, I'm home for almost every day for dinner. So that's normal. Otherwise, you're picking up your family, you're going overseas, you're working terrible hours. Everything you do is a lie. It's 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 very different that way. The folks in the FBI, for the most part, are just, they're coaching their son's wrestling team, they're Sunday school teacher, normal stuff. Like, you're doing your 9 to 5, and then you've got other stuff. Whereas with your in the agency, you've got, from what I could see, your life is taken up by the agency.
mm. That's maybe a dumb question, but would you just tell people, "Yeah, I'm in the FBI." What do you do? What do you do for work, Eric? You go, "Yeah, I'm in the FBI," or is it like, "Oh, I'm in law enforcement"?
So I found pretty quickly that I would just tell people, I'm a special agent with the FBI, because I would start with like, "Well, I work for the government," and they go, "Well, if I told you that,
Cloak and
what are you
dagger.
going
What
to?"
do you do? What do you
Well,
know?
if I s-
Show me the
well,
list, Eric. Show me the list.
if if I say I work for the government, you go like, "Oh, what part of the government?" And then it looks like I'm being coy, and like, you're eventually going to get there
Yeah.
anyway. So yeah, I work for the
Now,
FBI. I'm
would
a
someone who
special agent.
works for the CIA probably not tell you that?
Oh, they absolutely would not.
Oh,
They shouldn't.
interesting. Interesting. Hmm. So, knowing what you know, are you skeptical of both agencies and their behaviors, and or more skeptical of CIA or less skeptical of CIA or less skeptical of FBI? Because again, I'm on
Well,
the outside looking in. I know
yeah.
nothing about this. I'm far more skeptical of the CIA. I'm still skeptical of the FBI based on the things that I've told you.
All right. Well, I'll start with the FBI one. Don't be skeptical. Uh, the the people in the FBI, there's always turds too in the punch bowl, but they are the best people I've worked with. Very intelligent, very competent, very much dedicated to doing things the right
Mhm,
way. Not just like what can I get away with within the law, but like is this the proper thing? Not everyone is like that, but most of the people I worked with were like, I don't want to do this because this isn't correct. I, I was working with a guy from a different division, didn't really know him well, and we're getting an informant ready to meet with a kid who was a terrorist and likely to kill
mhm,
people. And so as we're sending the informant in, my this guy that I'm just getting to know tells him, "Hey, look, don't lead him in anything. Don't suggest anything. We don't want to charge or go after somebody who isn't looking to do violence. So don't try to draw him into that statement of violence. We want to know what his true heart
mhm,
is." And and that's exactly the same thing I would have said. And so I get to see that it's not just that we don't want to look bad, but we don't want to do what's wrong. And so here's a guy that I don't know from a different division coming in and telling my informant the exact same thing I would tell him. And so that's part of why I trust the FBI. That they're, aside from some of those cases you mentioned that are politically motivated, these are people who say, I I don't want to just follow the law. I want to follow the law in the right way.
mm.
And then as far as the agency goes,
It sounds to me like you're not totally sure, like, about the agency, because you
oh,
have limited, like, insight into what's happening there.
I I do. And so I don't want to talk like I know the agency, but I have had some interaction. And the one thing that I would say about the agency is the same thing I might say, and I have said within the FBI, and that is too often uh, agencies, groups, government entities speak about intelligence as if it's fact. And I was a guy, as I worked human intelligence, informants, was one of those people providing this information, and I knew, yeah, it's coming from a human being, and I would try to vet it and ask more questions to see how true can we assure this to be, and I know where it's coming from. And so if the agency would ever say, yeah, these guys are doing this, I'd think that's a guy.
Mhm,
That's a guy, and hopefully you get two guys, and so now it's maybe more believable. And so the only thing I would say is that many times government entities act as if their intelligence is something magical and sprinkled with fairy dust when it's just humans giving their observations.
mm, interesting. What do you think or make about the current state of the FBI? I just read an article yesterday. I have no idea if this is true, but that Kash Patel is drunk often. They have to get into his house to wake him because he was so intoxicated the previous night. Um, I don't know if that's true. Like, and maybe you don't even want to comment on it, but like from the outside looking in, it's like, geez, this seems really chaotic. And maybe
Yeah,
he's
I,
not.
I
Maybe
missed
he's
it.
not even qualified. I really have no idea if this individual is qualified at all for this job.
Well, the qualifications for FBI director in the past had been higher. So I missed the days of Robert Mueller, who was boring. He just did his job and occasionally testified to Congress. Jim Comey, for whatever you say afterwards, like he was a nice change because he seemed to care more about the agent and their families. So that was good. Chris Wray was a great blend of both of those from from my experience as an agent in the field,
Mhm.
not really knowing these guys. But Chris Wray was one who would take on some of Comey's behavior where he would stand up and correct things wrong about the FBI and would speak to the media occasionally, not as much as Comey, but then he was pretty staid as well, like Mueller. And so that was appreciated. And so, you know, Now we have Kash Patel, who is tweeting things and, chugging beers in a hockey. I, it's not what I'd like to see.
Hmm.
I like the other stuff where guys just did their job and didn't try to draw attention to themselves as a celebrity.
Yeah, I heard someone say this about Pete Hegseth, and I thought that made a lot of sense. I know it's unrelated, but they said that the way that he's speaking is kind of like unbecoming of the job, or like lower than his rank. Like, we're killing these bad guys, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense because I'm CEO of this company. It's not a big company. It's not, AT&T. But like, if I'm sitting with my employees, I'm not going to be like, oh, look at the tits on that girl. It's like, whoa, dude, like, whoa, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, you're supposed to be better than this. And maybe that's kind of how I feel about that Cash Patel, like chugging beers with the hockey team. Like, like, is this our guy? Like, I guess is he kind of relatable? Yeah. Do I need him to be relatable? I don't know if I do, you know? Like, I don't want
Yeah.
that to be like the CEO of my 6,000 person company. Like, he's chugging beers on camera. Like, I just don't know.
Yeah. I would have liked it if the FBI director happened to be in the arena and was a big fan of hockey, that he knocked on the door and said, "Hey, can I quietly congratulate everybody?" And that's it. You don't make it about me too. Like, I was part of this. Let me wear a medal. You just say, "You guys did a great job," shaking hands with everybody, and then you do your thing.
Well, not to mention this was my frustration. This was like mid Epstein, from what I
Yeah.
view as is an enormous cover up. And I don't know exactly why they're covering it up. I don't know if it's because President Trump is heavily involved in that situation. I would love to hear your opinion, but I'm like, forget this guy. Like, get out of the locker room, dude. Like, I'm not here for this.
Yeah.
What is your view on this whole situation?
So it's manifold. So number
What do
one,
you mean by that?
I it's got a lot of
Okay.
aspects to it. There, number one, I have always despised the idea of Congress investigating something. Congress is a legislative body. So the idea of, like, we should have people in and testifying, you can have oversight. You can say, I don't think you're doing your job right. But the idea of saying we should have victims in, we should have the Patel in or Bondi in to tell us what they know, that's not proper. So it should. I don't even know why DOJ is the mouthpiece for this. Was an FBI case. It should go back to the FBI to properly be investigated.
I guess
That
what I would say is, it feels like either that hasn't happened or that's intentionally been obfuscated. And yeah, like,
Yep.
if who's watching the watchers, right? Like, if we aren't getting any of the reasonable answers, when Pam Bondi says, I've got the list, and Cash Patel says, well, there is no list, and there's no information associated with him ever, being involved with other people. But then they've got the co-conspirators, I don't know, 13 co-conspirators, of which is our guy down the road, Les Wexner, right?
Yeah.
That's when I go, well, this is pretty obvious to me that it's a cover up. And I'm not saying Eric did it. I'm certainly not, but it does feel like somewhere someone is gone. Like, we can't put this info out.
Yeah. And so Congress has a place to say you aren't doing what you
Mhm.
should, but not to, like, the whole idea of, like, we're going to name names. Well, what does that do? Shame them, ostracize them. I mean, so some kids at OSU put up a sign about on one of the Wexner buildings. Like, that doesn't do anything. What should be done is justice being served through an actual investigation, which I agree there has been too much covered up. The redactions that come out, I've redacted items before. You redact personal information and victim names, and that's about it. Like, you don't redact unproven subjects' names. Like, there could be allegations against you, hasn't been shown to be true yet. I don't redact your
Mhm.
name. Like, because there's an accusation against you or that guy for having done this. We don't redact the name because they're not guilty yet. That's not how things work. So that's been covered up. And I would, so kind of jumping ahead in case this is a notion you had in mind, the FBI's case system is digitized, and so any agent can look up just about any case that's been worked in the FBI. except for some that get locked down if there's sensitive investigations. And this is certainly one to be locked down. So if you ever think like, oh, and why doesn't some noble employee of the FBI leak
Mm-hmm.
this? They wouldn't have access.
Mm,
So in case that's something that you were praying for, that somebody just sacrifices himself and says, "Here's everything,"
mm.
it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be available.
So, so where is that being handled? Like, is there like a top 5 guys and gals at the FBI that are like sitting in a meeting room and like looking at what should be redacted?
So here's how things work. I get a referral for a case, or an informant brings it to me, and it's on this guy who's, possibly a terrorist. Here's information, here's stuff online. I write up, take it to my boss. He looks at it. We talk to our chief division counsel, or our attorney, to see if it meets a standard, and then I open a case. If there's a case on like some significant
Like the
politician,
governor
or
situation.
like the governor, that's not done just by me writing it up and saying, hey, we learned this, and my next level supervisor approves it. That's going way up the
Mhm.
chain. So in a situation like this, even with the initial investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, knowing who he had connections with, I'm sure that the Attorney General, DOJ, knew about this, that it went all the way up the chain for people to consider what implications are there. So whoever's making decisions is being influenced by people all the way to the top, certainly.
Mhm.
And so they can't just choose, we'll do this, we'll do that. So, I mean, in the FBI, it would go all the way up to Patel. In DOJ, it would go all the way up to Blanche. And, they're gonna make that final call. Nobody can decide what to do until it gets up to them. And I'm sure they're calling up to the White House
Mm.
too.
So, knowing what you know about FBI, and I don't know how much you know about this specific case or situations, what do you think is going on with this whole situation? Like, what's your back of the napkin? And I'm sure you don't like to speculate. Um,
Oh, I'll
yeah,
speculate.
please, I would love to hear what you think is going on.
So I have a buddy who worked counterintelligence for a number of years.
And what does that mean?
Really, so looking at how other countries try to influence the United States or steal information from the United States. It
Okay.
could be as simple as a Chinese professor from OSU working in a lab and then sneaking sensitive data out back
Okay.
home, or it could be espionage, spies, any of that. So I asked my buddy who worked counterintelligence, if you were to create an asset for another country, Russia, Israel, would you have them act any differently than Jeffrey Epstein? So, a man who already has that sexual proclivity to work with underage girls and exploit them. There are so many, like, I've worked a number of cases on pedophiles. None of these guys get together in a group and say, hey, I'm going to go look at child porn. Who wants to come over and I'll put it on the big screen? They do it in
Right.
secret. This is a guy who reached out to every celebrity and powerful person imaginable, from royalty to presidents to secretaries of state, and tried to ingratiate himself and insinuate himself into their
Hmm.
lives, which is exactly what a foreign asset would do to try to gain influence through blackmail and bribery.
Hmm.
And so you can take from that, if that is true, then there are people affected by this, many, who would say, well, I don't want any of this out, and I have many friends with
Mm.
influence.
So your kind of take is some foreign government got to him early on, or maybe our government, right?
Could be.
Um, they said, "Hey, you've got like some really high level connections." Um,
No, no, no. I would say
they helped him gain those high level
they
connections.
they told him, like, he's an informant, he'd be an asset. Go make these connections. We can help you. Uh, but this is a guy who, it's much like you talked about the CIA doing dirty stuff. Well, they're going to run cocaine because here's a guy who's running cocaine already. Okay, well, let's use you to run guns too, and we'll use a sale of cocaine to support this group. They're going to take somebody already in place doing something illegal and say, fantastic, let me fund you and direct you to do it for us in this way. Jeffrey Epstein possibly is a man that they knew was involved with underage girls. None of my business, but use that to influence other people in places of power.
Mm, interesting. So then, as he kind of goes on, he meets these individuals. Kind of another take that I heard was he was sort of like a fixer, a finder for these people. It's like, oh, this wealthy businessman in Europe, like we do a deal with them, and then I invite him to this party, and it just so happens there's these beautiful 18 and 19 and 20-year-old girls here, and wow, it's really fun to go to those Epstein parties. And then, one thing leads to the other. Oh, you think those girls are pretty? Like, we got other situations going on. Um, I guess I understand that probably all happens. I guess our frustration or my frustration, I don't want to speak for the American people, is like, it seems like we have the info of what happened and how it worked.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
also heard someone say this. Now, you tell me if this is just like absolutely crazy, right? The law said that the FBI has to release the information.
Yes.
It did not say the CIA has to release information. Now, I know
Yeah.
you're laughing because I'm sure the first thing you're thinking is, well, that's going to never fucking happen. But I also heard someone say, like, the CIA's job is to have a file on Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh,
Like, from probably
yeah.
going back to like the 1980s, like their job is to have a file on this guy. He was representing one of the largest arms dealer in the world. Like they got to have a
Yeah.
file on this guy, right? So,
Yeah.
so what does that say?
If an American citizen has overseas influence, there's going to be some insight into him. Say, how can we use him? How can we exploit him? How can we follow him? What can he do for the United States government that benefits us?
Is it your opinion then that the information in that is that in some way, shape, or form, America sort of knew what was going on, and they knew he was doing some sketchy stuff, but as long as he played nice with the CIA or whoever, then it's like, hey, we can kind of make sure that you can keep doing this, and maybe he helps us every so often. So we're going to make sure that he doesn't go to jail.
It could be. It could be that the agency was involved, that they had an understanding. It could be that they didn't have much, because again, he's going to be domestic for the most part. He'll have ties overseas, and so they're looking at that. Maybe they just turn a blind eye because there's nothing they can do in the U.S.
Mm,
But it's my belief that Israel, Russia, or another country got a hold of him at some point and said, "Hey, work for us." And those people you say with those connections say, "Oh, I've got a businessman in Europe who can do this for you." Some of that being possibly manipulated and assisted by another government.
mm, interesting. Um, Well, Eric, what else have you learned while doing all this stuff at the FBI, man? What do you take from it? Like, was it a fun and awesome experience? Are you like disheartened? Are you excited? Like, where do you think it's all going in the future?
Uh, it was great. I look at it as like a social experiment that some crazy social scientist said, let's do a study and see what happens if we take this Baptist pastor who's never handled a gun before and we stick him in the FBI for a couple dozen years. Let's watch and see where it goes. And the things I got to be a part of were remarkable, and yet they're common to what a lot of agents go through. And so many times agents will sit down and we'll just have a discussion. If there's any open space, stories start coming out. And one guy will say something, another guy will tell another story, and I can sit back and laugh along with them, but also go, that is a crazy, like, that's an amazing
Mm-hmm.
story that we got to be a part of
Mm-hmm.
that. And yet it's just whatever we're throwing around during lunch or something. So yeah, being a part of that was always remarkable, and I didn't lose the fascination that I had when I was brought on with the FBI of, this is amazing that I get to do this. And while there's plenty of days of tedium and frustration during work, there's also those saltations of excitement and just remarkable experiences to be a part of. So I can think back at those. There are many of those times. I'm not going to think back of the days that the computer network was
Hmm.
down. But those stories that agents would share is something that I then put together in a book to say, well, here's a bunch of those stories that I think people will read and go, that is pretty
Mm.
cool.
So you got the book. When does it come out?
The book is coming out in the fall. My wife's company, Weaving Influence Press, is publishing it, and
Ooh.
unfortunately, paying customers jumped the line ahead of me, so I got to wait for them.
Oh, well, hey, those pesky customers. Business would be so fun if it wasn't for those.
Exactly. At the same time, my book is still with the FBI to review, so they make sure I'm
Right.
not sharing state secrets or embarrassing them. But the book is called Irreverend: From Saving Souls to Chasing Sinners in the
Mm.
FBI, and it tells a story of a reverend who goes through all these remarkable things in the FBI. And I share stories about investigations I initiated or I got to be a part of, including, you know, tracking down mass shooters before they
Mm.
attack, arresting legitimate terrorists, uh, interviewing a pastor who was among a group of other pastors that were trafficking a young
Oh,
girl,
jeez.
sex trafficking. Yeah, crazy things like that. That's part of what we did.
Mm. Crazy, man. Well, Eric, thank you, man. This was so fun. Where can people catch up with you and find everything associated with the book and the stuff you're putting out?
Absolutely. You can follow me on Instagram at _Eric_Robinson, on LinkedIn with my name and FBI in this face. And my website is
I
preacher2breacher.com,
like that.
because
What
I
so
was a preacher
yeah.
and I broke down
So the
doors.
book's on the way. What do you foresee being the next thing for the next couple of years for you? You don't look like you're ready to retire and, sit on a beach.
I will take you as saying, "Hey man, you look super young and fit," and I'll
You do.
accept it
You
as
do.
that.
I wouldn't, if
Uh,
you were a police officer, patting me down for drugs, I wouldn't run. I'd stay right
yeah.
there.
So from here, I don't. I hope it doesn't sound arrogant, but the FBI gave me a lot of great skills, tactics, SWAT, firearms, years of investigations and interrogations. So I'd like to be able to pass that on to other folks. Again, not to say I've got so much, but the bureau gave me so much, and I know how often undertrained sheriff's deputies and local police are. So getting an opportunity to pass things on to younger generation.
Awesome. Very cool, Eric. Well, thank you so much, man. Get out there, enjoy your Sunday. We got beautiful weather, it looks like.
Yeah, we do. That's right. We have pretty much the same weather, so that's good.
Yeah. You're maybe just like a couple degrees cooler up there.
That's all right.
If you make your way down, say hi.
We'll do.
Thank you, man.